problems just escalate. Now I'm starting to get arrested a lot. I'm rolling cars on the Florida Turnpike at 90 miles an hour. I remember jumping in the back seat in the middle of a highway. I'd been up for like 5 or 6 days. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I remember closing my eyes and being like, this ain't happening. This ain't happening. This ain't happening. I jumped. The car ends up hitting, this was what I was told or read in the police report, hit the left lane, tumbled, rolled across 3 times and ended up in a ditch at 90 miles an hour. I just took a nap. The car ended up coming in like an accordion, and I was in the perfect part of the 4-row car and not a stitch and not a broken bone.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. Let's start off with, what is your name?
Alex Delgado.
What is addiction?
Wow. Addiction, by definition, I think would be something that you cannot stop. However, for me, addiction would be a battle that almost took my life. And for me, I'm a very driven person, and addiction was something I could not overcome. I came up against it, and it handed me my lunch. It was something greater than me, and I believe it's greater than any one person as well when you come up against it.
Let's get into your story, Alex, however you want to share it.
I was born in Cuba, and I was brought here when I was 6 months old on a boat. And from a very early age, I was told we didn't come to this country to fail. You know, there was a sense of pride to be in the land of the free, the home of the brave, and the opportunity. My family, generationally, grandfather, very wealthy in Cuba, and overnight had everything taken from him. He went to a meeting at the Capitol and came home, and his business had a sign on it that said, no longer yours. And they interviewed him and said, actually, you could work here if you'd like. And he went crazy. Coming to a new country without many resources, I can't imagine. I'm a father now. I can't imagine getting on a boat, even though it's 90 miles away, and not having a job, not even having money, not even speaking the language, but having enough drive to succeed. My grandfather worked 3 jobs. From the time I can remember, my father was gone. So I was raised by a single mom and then my grandparents. We grew up in a very violent neighborhood in Chicago. It wasn't always that way, but at one point, maybe from 4 to 6 years old, one of the biggest gangs in Chicago moved across the street from us, and their headquarters was there. And I can remember from a little age, other gangs would come from my backyard and shoot across the street at the headquarters of the gang, and then they would have to shoot back. So they're shooting at my backyard, technically, and I remember screaming at the top of my lungs and my mom hiding me under the bed and in fear for her child's life and everything else. And this one time I distinctly remember 4 or 5 years old, probably, on a tricycle, Saturday morning. I go down the block and I hear screeching tires, and I turn and I see a big blue convertible, white leather interior. You could tell a white top down, a gentleman with blonde, long hair, and these screeching tires. And when I look, I see a cinder block flying through the air, and it just hits him in the back of the head, and I see his head explode. And all I remember is hearing, and it was this noise of probably his head on the steering wheel, on the horn. And I can remember in that moment very distinctly, it was the first time I had a panic attack. I was crippled with fear to the point where I was stuck. And I remember looking at my mom going, no, don't come, don't come, don't. Pop, 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 pop. They're shooting at the other end. I remember pulling in between a gangway and being petrified. I mean, consumed with fear. I don't know how much time lapsed between me getting home and feeling safe to my mom. In that moment, the root of fear crept into my life. Generationally, my family deals with paranoia from what happened in communism. So I heard the stories and stuff like that, but I didn't realize the root that happened from trauma to the brain at such a young age that I would go through life. Even as a teenager, my biggest fear was being beaten to death. Out of my peripheral, I'm watching my surroundings now. I'm worried about 18 different things, and those were purely survival skills that were taught out of trauma. Never really had a sense of identity because other than that gang, we really grew up in a very Italian neighborhood. I remember being little and all my friends were Italian, and I wanted to be Italian. I was almost ashamed of being Cuban to the point where my mom bought me an Italian jacket because I wanted an Italian jacket for Christmas. And I can think now, like, how uncomfortable does a child have to be that he can't even embrace his own heritage, but always wants to be something else? And deep rooted in that is probably the longing of a father, the longing of a male role, because I always wanted to be like others. Oh, I could be like that. Let me, put on a new mask. And I was this chameleon as I was growing up. Later on, we moved from that neighborhood to the all-Italian neighborhood, where that was purely 1950s mentality, extremely racist, extremely violent in the point of fighting, baseball bats, stuff like that. And again, a kid that's rooted in fear. 7th, 8th grade comes around, and now I'm finding the antidote to fear. Oh my gosh. Now this is really drinking. When I was younger, I tried it, but now I'm drinking to get drunk. First time I get drunk is in 7th grade to the point of vomiting. And I remember being the happiest I've probably ever been. I mean, something came on me that was, I hate to even use this word, glorious. I was like, oh my gosh. All the answers that I have been looking for my whole life are in this substance. I could be who I want to be. I could not be afraid. I could not care what people think. I could womanize. I could maybe act like I was tough. And I found my identity, little did I know it, in a substance. And then I found my friends. And then I was getting nicknames based off of my drinking. And my whole environment now from 7th grade on is based off of a substance and who I become when I drink. I snorted cocaine for the first time on a high school desk. We were so naive and thought that life was just a party. I mean, I remember going out to nightclubs at 15 years old. In nightclubs in Chicago, and in my neighborhood, it was so crooked. I was showing my high school ID at the door to get in because he's like, hey, the feds are watching across the street. Show me something. At 17 years old, I had a rude awakening. It was like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do with your life? In my neighborhood, you kind of did 3 things. You became a fireman, you worked for the village, you stole drugs, I guess 4 things, or you worked at the stock market. So there was a lot of guys that worked downtown at the stock market. And I remember going to a friend and showing up at one of the guys' houses, like, can I get a job? He said, see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. Come see me, ask for this name. I remember going down there. I walked on the trading floor. I saw him. They got me a badge. They brought me downstairs like, hey, this guy's with so-and-so. He's from this neighborhood. Very connected. And I walked on the trading floor, and I felt what was like Roman gods in the Colosseum screaming that roar of the open outcry, buy soul, buy soul. And these guys that looked larger than life, 20-something-year-olds making $100,000, $200,000 a day, sometimes even more in a day. Millions of dollars are being, and they drive the cars, they have the boats, they have the houses, they're going all over the world, they have the jewelry. And I said, this is why I was created. I didn't come to this country to fail, and this is what I want to do with my life. And I remember just going through the ranks, learning as much as I can every day, asking questions. By the time I was 18 years old, I was making more money than anybody in my house. and I'm traveling, and I was 17 on the stock market trading floor, watching things. I mean, Super Bowl pools that are 100,000 in cash, 500,000 in cash, 600,000 in cash, one winner, all this stuff. And I went in for all of it. And I was taught at a very young age, work hard, play harder. And that's where it started. Right around 21, 22 years old, something happened. I had such paranoia in my life for this false identity that I created, that the false identity was only under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And now when I found myself sober, paranoia of just like that 4-year-old boy, heart pounding, shaking, anxiety, blood pressure through the roof. Obviously, a lot of it self-induced from drugs, and you can't do $300 worth of cocaine and feel good the next day. So I'm just in a full-blown paranoia because I know I'm not who I'm pretending to be. In the height of my addiction, I would wake up around 7:45, get to work not far away at like 8:15. I would pound 3 or 4 beers in 10 minutes. The first one out of a straw because I couldn't get it to my mouth from the shaking. Then I'd do 2 shots of Jack Daniels and maybe 10 Vicodin. Now that was breakfast. And then that would get me to lunch. Another 10 Vicodin and the same amount of drinks. Now that's just a 12-pack to get through work. And then the party would begin at 3:15 when the bell rang. And I would drink till I pass out and take Xanax around 9 o'clock. And I would do that 7 days a week. I would get so sick that I had diseases. Just things that they would be in the hospital looking like, how is this a young guy have this stuff, like cellulitis and these infections, and then my stomach would shut down. I remember going to the hospital, I had 2 liters worth of liquid in my stomach. I could not urinate because the doctor ended up telling me your muscles are so high they won't contract. So they had to put catheters inside of me to extract liquid from me, and the insanity would not stop because I hated who I was so much without drinking that I could not overcome. I would move. I'd go to Miami. My family would put me up there. I was there 3 weeks. I get a job making 6 figures. Now my problems just escalate. I don't know how many cars I've crashed. I don't know how many DUIs. I don't know how many arrests. I think 3 DUIs. I don't know how many arrests. I'm in the process of expunging my record. I know the big ones. I know the felonies and things like that. But I would wake up in jail the second I got out, drink. Not drinking scared me more than anything in the world because I thought, this is my medicine. This is how I overcome everything. And now you're telling me I can't have it? I end up in Vegas, of all places, and I run completely out of money. And I remember being in a hotel room, and if it had a balcony, I probably would have jumped off of it. And I was at the bar. They had 75-cent beers, and I invite a prostitute to live with me. She's got nowhere to go, some 20-something-year-old girl from Illinois, of all places. And I was like, come on, come with me. And she's asking me to be her pimp. And I'm like, what has my life come to? Like, I can't do this. I remember being so sick, I'm starting to withdraw. And my mom gives me a call that day, and she says, son, you have tried everything in this world. You need God. And I just remember being so angry. I said, if there was a God, do you think he would allow me to be what I've become? She connects me to a program named Teen Challange. I remember, I think I had like $40 left to my name, and they had 75-cent beers at the bar. This place interviews me on the phone. This guy, Andy, starts asking me these questions, and he's like, so what do you don't think you got more for your life? I'll never forget he asked me that than being at that bar in Vegas right now. And I remember in a moment just saying, man, I really thought my life was going to matter. I really thought that I was going to come here, and because my parents told me we didn't come here to fail, I didn't think I would fail. I thought that I was going to be extremely successful. I had hopes, I had dreams, and he's like, it's like, man, God's got a plan for your life. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever. There's no God. I get in the car to this program. In my classic maneuver, I have a coffee cup full of alcohol, and they bring me to a hospital where they would have to medically detox me. And 5 days later, I arrive at Teen Challange in Elkhart, Indiana. I'm in an Amish community where I feel like I'm in the witness protection program. And I walk into this holy environment where people are like, hey, brother, hey, brother, hey, brother, and like saying scriptures and praying with their hands up. I never seen anybody lift their hands for prayer. 17 days, I didn't sleep straight. Not a wink. I was losing my mind. I remember looking and like seeing shadows on the wall. I'm going crazy. And they're like, eventually you'll sleep. Eventually you'll sleep. I was like, but give me some books. What do you got here? I'm not a reader. So in 17 days, I have read 3 books of the Lord radically changing people. And I started to think, why can't God change me? And little bits of hope started to come. Few battles, I ran across the street, grabbed a bottle of vodka, drank it, and then they're like, come back. The most grace I've ever been shown. And I broke, man. I remember crying and calling my grandfather, and I was like, man, you can't die yet. You have to see me get together. He was sick at the time. They take us to a conference. I just remember, what on earth am I doing here? I'm fighting it. We've been there about 3 nights, and this man gets up. Daniel Lim, he was their CFO, and he spoke very broken English, but he said they will be lovers of money. And I remember just listening like, okay, finally, somebody knows what the heck they're talking about in this place. I love money. Speak. And then he says they will be boastful, proud, disobedient to their parents, the type of men who creep into women's bed loaded with sin. And I could not believe the words that he kept on reading. And I remember everything changed. It went from 40,000 people in the room and looking at all these people to tunnel vision. All I could see is this guy. And all I could see is that there's a God. There really is a God. And this guy said something. I don't even know what he said. Come to the altar was the gist of it. And I just went. And I knelt down and I wept. And I wept. And I wept. And I remember crying and just saying, remove my alcoholism. I didn't say nothing else. Nothing else. I didn't pray a sinner's prayer. I didn't pray a salvation. I believed there was God, and all I could say was remove my alcoholism over and over and over and over. I don't know how long I was at that altar. Afterwards, I went to that guy, Andy, who's on the phone from Vegas, and he led me in the sinner's prayer and the Lord's prayer, and that was December 30th, 2010. My eternal state changed that day. I gave my life to Jesus Christ that day, and I have never been the same. Now, I have definitely struggled in life, and I have even relapsed since then. But something happened there where hope entered my heart, where there was no hope. There was a hope of something greater than myself that could truly set me free. There was a hope and a peace that came on me that didn't have to leave. A peace that didn't give me a hangover. A sense of security that didn't leave me thinking, oh, I'm not really that. It was almost like you have an identity now, and no one can take this identity from you. And then I read the verse that changed my life forever. This verse on December 30th, 2010, radically transformed everything about me for the rest of my life. It's 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if he is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone. The new has come. And I said, on this verse, I will bank my life. That I am no longer an addict. That I am no longer a fearful person. That I am no longer. That now I belong to Christ. And I am who he says I am. So I say this long story. A guy that lived in private islands on Miami Beach. A guy that had everything you can imagine. Rolexes, BMWs, been in nightclubs, traveled the world, going from De La Hoya fights in Vegas to Aspen to Cancun to Cozumel, all over, ends up an IV homeless heroin addict. After encountering Jesus, after being set free, I had a relapse. And in that relapse, it would last for 1 year. I was dating someone that shot me up for the first time. And I didn't even like it the first time. But this person was doing it. And eventually I had that shot where everyone talks about. And it's that high that you end up chasing for the rest of your life. And I remember sitting there and was like, wow, now I'm a heroin addict. I have to steal a bottle of vodka out of a liquor store, the cheapest they have, just to get enough courage to be able to panhandle or do what I got to do to now feed a heroin addiction. I remember hoping, man, I hope this is my last shot and it's over. I hated myself. I became something I never thought I would. That is the power of relapse. I still wanted to do things my way. I wasn't surrendered. I was trying to be the person without a substance that I was before. But God doesn't work like that. When you get saved, he changes everything. He gives you a new heart and you see things different. I didn't want the new heart. I just wanted sobriety. So I was trying to pimp God for sobriety, and it didn't work very well for me. I ended up in the darkest place of my life. And then on February 20th, 2014, I bowed my knee in a hotel room. I had to unpack for the last 12 years of my life everything that I had learned, unlearned, all this stuff. But I keep coming back to that I am a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. There's been trauma that I still have to work through. There has been things that have happened, but I believe that Jesus Christ on the cross died for my sins. And the way I relate it is, I'm not trying to not drink. I'm trying to pursue God. I'm not running away from alcoholism. I'm running towards Jesus Christ. And for me, that shift to run towards something greater and see what he's done in my life radically transformed me. And it wasn't overnight, a little voice says you could just have a drink. Oh, addiction is still there. Temptation will always be there for the rest of my life. But I don't say that I'm an alcoholic. I say that I'm a redeemed son of Jesus Christ. My identity is in who God says I am. If I choose to go back, addiction is waiting for me on steroids. If I have one sip, I am a dead man walking. I do not think for 1 second that, oh, Jesus set me free, I could drink wine. No, I have to get away from everything. I don't care if you have 10 years sober, 20 years sober, 30 years. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. However, if you clean a house and you invite a demon back in, he's coming with 7 more friends. So my life radically changed. Now I have the backwards country song where now I have the wife, I have the kids. My wife has 7 years sober. I just celebrated 9. I'm a little over 9 years sober. We've created a family. We have a ministry. I met my wife at an altar call. The same place where I met Jesus is where I met my wife, with my hands in the air. And she is on the same mission that I am, to change the world. We believe that we can change the world one person at a time. I work for an addiction ministry now because I wholeheartedly believe that Jesus can set you free. If you're willing to surrender it all to him, he will take it and give you a life that you could not imagine. I would never in my life think that I would travel the nation speaking about Jesus. I say this, I don't know if you're watching, maybe you're in active addiction, but your pain has a purpose. And it'll either be your platform or your prison. Because my pain was my prison for 20-something years, but now it's my platform. Literally the very same pain that kept me in prison, God put on a platform and said, I'm going to use all of that. People are like, aren't you embarrassed to tell people you're a heroin addict? I have to tell people I'm a heroin addict, because if I ever forget where I come from, I'm bound to go back. This is how I overcome. Kenny, when you asked me to be on the podcast, I was like, I need this more for me. This is great that you're being blessed, but I've been set free. And I don't know where you find yourself today, but there's hope. And never in my life, I used to hear people talk about these testimonies all the time, and I'd be like, that's for them, not for me. If you heard nothing else in this podcast, but you're looking at someone who truly tried to beat addiction. Listen, I've run 5 Ironmans, 2 full distance Ironmans, 3 half Ironmans. I've done marathons. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. I did my last Ironman with 2 herniated discs, a 7mm listhesis, and blockage in my heart. And I still found a way to walk the marathon and bike and swim 2.4 miles, 112-mile bike, 26.2. I am a driven person. And when I tell you I came up against addiction and could not win, I tried everything. I would have tried Buddha. I would have tried Allah. I tried therapy. I tried acupuncture. I tried medicine. I tried pills. I tried every type of rehab, from Betty Ford clinics to the $25,000 ones to the free ones. I could not overcome addiction. I had to give my life to Jesus, and he overcame addiction in my life. And that's my story.
What would be your biggest tip for somebody who is either just getting into sobriety or they're early in their sobriety and they're trying to find sustainable sobriety?
My biggest tip for sobriety is accountability and community. You have to be authentic. Does anybody know who you are 100%? Because we like to tell enough people enough things, but who in your life can you bear it all to? I have a lot of accountability in my life. I have probably 7. Sometimes people are like, that's too much. Not for me. You know, I have accountability for working out. I have accountability for finances. I have accountability in my wife, which is 24/7. I have accountability in Jesus with the Holy Spirit. But then I also have pastors. You need to understand that you're not alone. And here's a unique spin on it. Who are you helping? Because as somebody's helping you, we need to be helping others. It's like a two-way street. You get more out of helping others, and it's almost self-serving what I'm about to say. But when you see somebody else in a pretty bad situation, you are pretty grateful. So make sure you have accountability in your life, you have mentors, and make sure you're helping somebody.
Is there anything else you felt like you wanted to share that we didn't touch on?
I know that I mentioned my wife was in addiction. You know, it's powerful when you see her mugshots, you see mine, and then you see this family, you know, that came together, you know, that God united. I thank God, you know, for a wife that understands. I'm truly thankful for a woman who we kind of looked at each other and said, if we're not sober, we're gone. And we both understand that line. If one crosses it, bye. So I'm really thankful for my wife.
Last question I have for you, Alex, is what is sobriety?
Sobriety is the greatest gift I've ever been given. I can honestly say that to me. People are, what about your wife? What about your kids? Without sobriety, I wouldn't have a wife. Without sobriety, I wouldn't have kids. Without sobriety, I wouldn't be a pastor. Other than my salvation, which for me, salvation brought sobriety. It's the greatest gift on earth for me. It is a clear mind, a clear conscience. I'm transparent. I'm still jacked up, but I'm sober. I didn't have a drink today. I didn't have a drug today. I didn't have to manipulate for that. If I were to die today, I'd die 9 years and change sober. So for me, it is a gift that I hold dearly.
Hi, I'm Kenny Hill with Recovery Hill. My intention here is to show the diversity of sobriety. How one finds themselves clawing from bottom is as nuanced as their journey to bottom. And their situation and recovery has the potential to be highly relatable to somebody who is watching. Therefore, I offer the interviewees to have total freedom to express whatever has worked for them, whatever has helped them sustain sobriety. That said, here at the end of the interview, I want to make a quick request so that it wasn't to take away from the interview itself. This request is that you like and share the video. You can subscribe if you want, that's up to you, but at least like and share it so that the content can get to as many people as possible. There is a great capacity and potential for the story you just watched to be able to help out somebody else to begin their story of recovery.